is Marcus Kowal with Studio MMA and MMAnytt, and we're here in Stockholm with the co-main event, Stann, all the way from the United States. How's the jet lag?
It's not too bad. Sleeping during the day mostly. I mean, the most important thing to me is to make sure that about 9 p.m. at night, I'm wide awake. And so I've done that so far, so all's good.
You've been here for a couple of days now. You came in a day earlier than a lot of the other fighters. What was the thought behind that?
I actually came in a couple days. I came in a full week in advance, and that was just to make sure I was acclimated. This is an important fight for me. And I sacrificed an awful lot during this training camp. I didn't want to come out on Tuesday and run the risk of being overtired on Saturday and not adjusted and not fighting at the right time. So I felt it was important to get out here a week in advance, have my coach out here, and just got a couple days training out here in Stockholm to be ready.
You are an icon in America, known as the American hero, and rightfully so. You have been in Sweden for a week, you mentioned. Have you had a chance to go out in town, and if so, do people recognize you?
I've gotten to go out a little bit, and I've gotten recognized a few times. I was surprised by that. There's a lot of really hardcore MMA fans out here, and obviously I knew there would be, seeing how quickly the event sold out. So everybody's really excited about it, and I'm pretty excited about being here just because of that.
Unfortunately, in Swedish TV and the media, MMA has been portrayed as something maybe not so great, and there's been a lot of talks about the risk of injury and so on. If you had to say, yesterday, for example, on one of the biggest Swedish TV channels, there was a talk about the risk of brain damage and so on. If you had a chance to sit down with these experts, so to speak, who actually don't know anything about mixed martial arts per se, what would you tell them?
I tell them to look around at a lot of the other sports. I mean, the other sports that are really popular in the world today, specifically American football or, even rugby, I mean, those sports, the head trauma in sports like that are much more dangerous than mixed martial arts. And so they need to look at their history. There's not enough lineage in the sport for them to really come back with analytical data and say, wow, look at all the head injuries that are coming out of the sport, because we're not taking the headshots that other sports like boxing, like football, like rugby are. And those sports are far more dangerous. So, I mean, it's one of the things that I hope I leave behind in my legacy of fighting, is to help advance the sport past that reputation. I think we've done a really good job of that in many of the countries where people don't look at the sport as that brutal anymore. They look at it truly as a sport. But obviously in some of the markets, similar to here in Sweden, that we need to go out, put on great shows, and showcase that it is a sport and it's not as brutal as some people may think.
And it's interesting to see where you have such hardcore MMA fans, as you mentioned previously, and we sell out so quickly, and then we have the other side, which is so against it, so to speak. We're in a country where professional boxing was banned up until just a few years ago. What would your advice be in order to close that gap between the two?
Well, it's really on the fighters. It's on the fighters, it's on the promoters to educate the people in Sweden and let them know how important the sport is, and open their doors up. Let them see the training that's involved. Let them see what takes place in the fight, the aftermath. Let them see the commissions doing their job to making sure that guys are medically qualified to step in there and compete. Those are the types of things that people don't see. What they see is they click the channel real quick, they see someone who got cut by an elbow, they see blood, and they think, oh man, that's so brutal. What they don't realize is that that's simply just a cut. That's not a concussion. It's not a lot of the heavy injuries you see in other sports.
Now, on Saturday night in Globen, there's going to be predominantly Swedish fans, obviously, and it's a huge historic moment for Swedish mixed martial arts. When leading up to the fight, do you think of those things at all, where the cage stands when you step into it?
A little bit. You do, and it's always fun to do that. I was taking pictures on the street yesterday, just trying to get some pictures of the globe, from a distance and whatnot, because 15 years from now when I'm retired from fighting, those are the types of things you're really going to remember. So it really does matter. Come Saturday night, I won't be thinking about that as much. I'll really just be focused on my opponent.
Have you looked into the fight card at all? Did you do that? Look at the other fighters that fight on the card alongside you?
You're always going to notice that. You're going to see who else is on the card, who do I know, who are my buddies, and they've really done a good job of packing this card. And I've noticed that there's definitely some good local talent here as well. In Sweden, guys that really belong in the UFC and are really getting their shot now. And that's the great thing about the UFC being so international, is that it gives it a chance to discover fighters from different countries that are most likely going to stay on the UFC roster for a long time to come.
And you're obviously a very experienced fighter and a UFC veteran. Except from Alexander Gustafsson and Papu's had one fight in the UFC. The other Swedish fighters are stepping into the octagon for the first time for the UFC. You've been there. These guys are doing it not just stepping the game up into the UFC, but they're doing it in front of their home crowd, so to speak. How is that? Is it a big difference stepping into a UFC cage to the octagon?
No, it is. It's going to be a big deal for them. It's going to be even tougher, I think, in front of their home crowd than doing it somewhere that's neutral. I think there's a lot of added pressure on those fighters' shoulders, and so it's not an easy debut to do it in your home country, your first time in the UFC, because it's a major step up in competition. The UFC, they don't build people up. They don't give you feeder fights or build up fights. I mean, everybody's good at this level, so I give those guys a lot of credit to make their debut here on Saturday in their hometown, and I wish them the best of luck.
Now, you're the co-main event against Alessio Sakara from Italy, who feels that it's close to Sweden, Italy, and he believes there's going to be Italian fans here. Do you think people have made a trip from the US? Obviously, it's going to be watched on TV, but do you know American fans who made the trip over here?
I didn't. None of my family did. I'm sure there'll be some in the stands, and I don't think it'll matter. I think the fans are going to cheer for that fight no matter what, because we're going to throw fists at each other's face. So I'm not going to know whether they're saying Italian, Swedish, English. I won't hear a thing. So I'm excited either way.
Main event, Alexander Gustafsson, who's been the face of Swedish mixed martial arts for some time now. Obviously added pressure on his shoulders as well, stepping up, being the main event as well. Any predictions on that fight?
It's really tough to predict. I mean, that's going to be a great fight. All I could say is that I've heard amazing things about Alexander and his training and guys that have trained with him. And obviously, we've seen the results of his fights. But some of the guys that I've seen that train with him have told me outright that, man, he's a guy that you just really don't want to stand in front of whatsoever and strike with. So it'll be interesting. Thiago Silva is a guy who's at the top of the division. We're going to see how he comes back. He's been, on a year suspension. So, that's going to be a real interesting fight to watch. Hopefully I'll be back there and showered and able to watch it.
You heard it from Brian Stann, the co-main event from Globen in Sweden, 14th of April. Make sure you don't miss it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.